Welcome to RSE for Grown-Ups. Come along with us as we walk you through the Relationships and Sex Education curriculum, otherwise known as RSE. We will be breaking the current curriculum down into manageable key stage chunks and topics.
This podcast is for parents, caregivers, or anyone in a supportive role with a young person. We will help you feel equipped for the highs and lows of growing up. If you're already listening, then it shows you are committed to supporting the important young people in your life. I'm Kelsie.
And I'm Sophie, and we are outreach workers at Luton Sexual Health. This podcast was funded by Public Health in Luton.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to RSE for Grown-Ups. This episode is the second part of our Key Stage 3 episode, where we are talking about year 7 to year 9, so 11 to 14-year-olds. In the first episode, we talked about normal behaviour for that age group, about how they make friends, begin to understand consent and healthy relationships. And then we had a chat with my son, which was very interesting, hearing what he had to say.
Yeah, he made some great points.
He did make some really good points.
And it's always great to hear actually from a young people's perspective, because sometimes we can sit here and say all this stuff and like it is a different world to when we were young people, but actually like a lot of the stuff, you know, it's still relevant. It's still, you know, the friendships and the growing up, it's still the same. And he's still going through some of the stuff we went through. So it was cool.
It was cool. So that was really interesting. Now, what we realised is that this age is a really big age when it comes to being safe online and young people. And how we wanted to divide this up was to kind of tell you last episode a little bit about what's on the curriculum, the changes that young people are going through and what's important to them. Now, in this episode, we're going to go into much more detail about staying safe online.
Yeah.
And actually, we might cover some topics which people might find maybe a little bit more triggering or a little bit more difficult to discuss. And we're going to talk about the realities of sexual health and this age group.
Yes.
Okay. So
it's a big topic. I'm
we're really starting to get into it now. We were saying like from starting the first episode talking about the younger age group and nicey primary school, how we be nice friends, to actually we're getting into the realms of risk and reward.
Yeah.
We need to get into this.
Yeah. And I think it feels quite, you know, like big for us to have these conversations, particularly about being online. And as we talk about our sexual health clinic and what that means for this age group, and as we move into the Key Stage 4, because our roles exist because some of these issues exist, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we wouldn't be here.
We wouldn't be here if this stuff just wasn't a thing. And we see it every day, all the time. We have clients referred to us, or we're brought into schools, or a doctor will call us to come down the clinical corridor to say, I need you to speak to this 14-year-old. I've got some concerns and I need, like, you know, this person's going to need ongoing support. So yeah, it's one that we're very passionate about. I feel like
definitely there's a lot of thought that goes into this. And I would say that the majority of my one-to-one referrals for young people who are at risk of sexual exploitation, not necessarily being exploited, but those young people who are potentially displaying signs of risky sexual behaviour or at risk of exploitation do generally fall into this age category and are year 8s or year 9s. Year 10 or year 11, we might find the referrals are less at risk of and more involved in risky sexual behaviour or exploitation, rather than this is a bit of a precursor and a warning sign.
So we really meant it when we said it's a pivotal age.
Yeah, absolutely.
We really mean it.
We really
From experience,
do mean it.
It's like, to get them at this age and to have these conversations is prevention from some of the stuff that they may then encounter as they get older.
Absolutely. Okay, so 13, when it comes to online safety, 13 is the big age. Why is 13 such a big age for online safety?
Well, firstly, that's when they can have social media legally, isn't it? They're allowed social media at 13. Although we were talking before this, we have encountered 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds who have got WhatsApp on their phone
and TikTok.
And Snapchat probably, I don't know. But yeah, WhatsApp and TikTok for sure. And like sometimes that's because they're talking to their parents on WhatsApp, but that also means that they're in a whole group chat with their whole class of 9-year-olds on WhatsApp, and that's when you're just a bit like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that. But 13-year-olds, I think it's a big age for being online because it's how they communicate with their mates. We talked in the last episode, didn't we, about how you go to secondary school and you maybe start making new friends, fitting in. And part of that, I've had a lot of young people say to me that being without social media or not being online means that they won't know what's going on, that
they don't feel like they're part of the group,
that they won't be able to communicate with their friends about stuff, or they'll miss out on things, like they'll get FOMO, or they won't have seen that funny meme and then they won't be able to talk about it. It's like, it's a big part of their social interaction, and it's a big part of how also they might form relationships and keep those relationships going outside of school.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that you've heard how I feel about phones and young people before, and I'm going to share an analogy with everybody that I have shared with groups of teachers, groups of parents in kind of other situations before. So a very normal part of being a child is learning to cross the road, right? So when we're little, our parents, they'll hold our hands, they'll teach us you must look left, you must look right, although I looked the totally opposite ways of what I said then. Okay, so we teach our children you need to look left, look right, look left again. You need to hold hands. You need to look out for dangers and be alert to those things. You need to use the tools that are available to you. So if you want to learn to cross the road, it's always better to go to a zebra crossing or somewhere where you can press the button and cross at the light. And if you are in a situation where you're going to the park with your friend and someone, I don't know, runs across the road and gets hit by a car, gets hurt, falls over, you also know what to do in a really dangerous emergency situation. So we teach our children that they would call 999 to access an emergency service. Now, my personal belief is that we should teach our children to use their phones in the same way as we teach them to cross the road, that it is our responsibility as parents to guide them through that process and actually handhold them through the start of it. So that might mean, hey, we're going to set up your phone together. My son got his phone when he was 12. And that's when he'd had access to devices and the internet, like using an old iPad or like an old phone with no SIM card, that kind of thing. But he'd never had like his own little bit of privacy, his own personal device until he was 12. So he got his phone. And how we kind of started that hand-holding process and doing this together is that we needed to make sure that the accounts were set up in the appropriate way. So whether it's using the built-in features, like if you have like a Google phone, you can set up parental controls where when they download an app, you have to accept that, things like that. So making sure that all of those safety nets were in place. And then we want to teach our kids to look left and right. We want to talk about the warning signs, the things to look out for. So we know this is how you use your phone. This is something that might make you feel uncomfortable. This is what you do if you feel uncomfortable. These are the warning signs you look out for. This is the information that it's appropriate to share, and this isn't. And then we have to teach them what to do if something goes wrong. So in the same way that they know that you call 999 in an emergency, if you are scared or if someone is hurt, those kind of things, we need to know what to do on our phone. Do they know how to block somebody who is making them feel uncomfortable on the different devices or on the different apps, games? Like when we were talking to Will, my son, he said, know how the games work that your kids are playing. And I thought, that's such a good point. Like, I could tell someone how to block their contact on a phone, but do I know how to block a friend on Roblox that's harassing someone? Could I help my kid with that? How do I report an image that is not good, that shouldn't be there? How do I get something taken down that makes them feel uncomfortable? It is our responsibility as parents to teach our children this, and it isn't on the national curriculum.
No, not really. No.
So like we do the basics of online safety as part of RSE, and schools, like it was Safer Internet Day last week. Both of my children learned a bit about Safer Internet Day last week and how that was important. But actually, it is really down to us to teach them about what isn't acceptable online and how they manage themselves with basically having the whole internet at their fingertips and all that technology at their disposal.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like in schools, they will be taught the things like not to share personal information with people you don't know, or not to arrange to meet up with someone who you don't know in real life, and not to send certain images, or not to send a picture of your face, or don't take a picture of yourself in your school uniform, like all of those things. But as we've spoken about a lot, and as we encounter with our jobs, if those messages aren't then consistent, and when they've actually got their phone or their iPad or whatever in their hands, and somebody's not talking them through those things, then sometimes it just goes out the window, because sometimes it's really hard to put what you know into practice when you're actually in those situations, or when you get carried away in a game, or when you make a connection with someone online and you think that they're a really nice, cool person, and then they ask for something that maybe you're like, oh, well, a friend, it can't be that bad because they're my friend. Like all those things that you get caught up in when you're a teenager, because like we said in the last episode, you want to fit in, you want people to like you, you're looking for those connections.
Yep.
And lots of young people now do that online, and maybe sometimes that's their sole way of making friends, because sometimes it is easier because you're not face to face with someone. You can sit behind your keyboard and feel really comfy and safe in your house.
Yeah.
And don't have to meet some of the expectations of being in a social interaction with someone face to face.
Definitely. I think that's a really good point. And also, I think that young people want to know how they can have friends online safely. So when we as adults might be like, don't talk to strangers. Yeah. And then we just end the conversation there. And they're like, well, this person's not really a stranger because I've been playing games with them for the last 3 years and we have really strong shared interests, and I can tell that they're a real person my age. And that's really interesting. And I said with my son, like, how do you know that someone's a real person your age? And he was talking about context. And he was saying that, like, you can say that someone might pretend to be a child to talk to children and young people online, but actually then are they saying things that are not the language that young people would use? Does it seem a bit weird? Are they not quite getting the slang, or are they not really into the game? They're just into the people. All of those kind of elements are really important.
Yeah, we talk a lot about, especially when you and I work with young people who may be at risk of exploitation, or are already exhibiting like risky behaviours and things like that. Maybe they're going missing and, you know, that sort of thing. We talk a lot about how they feel in their bodies. Like, where does that risk land? Like, is their heart, is their heart pounding? Does it make their stomach churn? Like how can they recognize how their body feels and what they're thinking? And like we said, giving them the autonomy to follow some of their gut instincts around certain things, and then come to you to ask for help and support if it's not quite going, if it continues to feel that way, I suppose. I was going to ask you a question actually about what do you think then about, because I know how I feel about it, but I'm not a parent. Because when young people share something they shouldn't, or have got into some trouble online, maybe the school knows, sometimes maybe another service knows, like the police or social care, and the phone is just taken away and all of the communication that they have is stopped, or the internet gets switched off, or they have to hand their phone in when they get in from somewhere and they're not allowed it. Do you think those sort of techniques work, or do you think there are other ways around handling it?
That's a really interesting question. So I will definitely put my hands up to the fact that I will use removing technology as a consequence. I've never been in a situation as a parent where anything that my children were doing online concerned me or worried me, or that they'd done anything sort of inappropriate. But definitely if they won't do their homework or help me in the house, I'm like, that's it. Everybody's banned.
No more Xbox.
No more Xbox. No more laptops. No more iPad. And I go around the house and I scoop up all the technology and I hide it. Sometimes I just turn the internet off altogether. I've been known
that
to
is old school. Yeah. Just unplugging it.
Unplugged it. I've been known to tell my children that the internet wasn't working as well when I really needed them to work on something else.
Nice.
So, but I do have mixed feelings about that when it comes to young people that maybe have taken some risks online and it maybe hasn't gone the way they've anticipated it to, or there's been a negative consequence, because realistically in those sort of situations, they do need to learn what happened and how, maybe when they could have asked for help, what options were available to them, at what points maybe someone else could have intervened and changed the outcome on that. And also a little bit of an understanding of why they made the decision they did. So it doesn't necessarily help to just take that away, say like, oh, you're in trouble, I'm going to take your phone away from a month and then give it back. Because cool, during that month, they might be socially isolated from their friends. They might not know what's going on in the group chat. It can also make people feel a little bit more of a target in this day and age, because if, for example, something's happened, like your image has been leaked around school and then you've had your phone removed, you don't know what's happening as part of that discourse. You're not involved in it anymore. So an element of control has been taken away from you because an image that you shared has now gone beyond your control. And then an element of control has been taken away from you because you can't be part of the conversation around you anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that, although I think a lot of parents will admit to taking their children's technology away as a sort of punishment sometimes, I do think that if you're taking it away from them because they haven't been managing it responsibly, then you do really need to set those expectations of how they manage it responsibly before you give it back to them.
Yeah.
So what does technology use look like in your family? How are you agreeing to that? Are your children and young people allowed their phones in their bedroom at night? Is there a set time when it's like, no, that's enough? Are there limits on the apps that they use? Because we know you can set app limits.
Yeah.
I think the recommendation is that young people shouldn't spend more than 30 minutes a day looking at Instagram.
Wow.
And that's Instagram's own recommendation.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
That it can have a negative impact on their well-being if they spend more than around 30 minutes a day. I know that I probably spend more than 30 minutes
well, that's
a day.
it. That's why I was a bit
Instagram.
shocked, because I was like, oh God, that makes me feel a bit sick, because I definitely do that. But there's so much research, isn't there, about, you know, there's a TV program on at the moment about young people having their phones taken away for a certain amount of time, and people have introduced boxes where young people will slot their phones in like on their own accord and see how it affects them. And we know that it improves their mental health, it improves their sleep, it improves their focus, it improves how they feel about themselves. So although we know that it's not like they're not going to stop using it, it's giving them all of those, like we were talking about before, boundaries, and what does that look like at home?
Yeah,
and
how do we model that?
How do we model that? And how do we model that? I think about when I become a parent, I can't be sat there scrolling on Instagram whilst I'm watching the telly, which is an awful habit, because then you're modeling like, I've got two screens in front of me, but I'm going to just scroll on Instagram because it's become habit. And
do you know something I've learned about that, which isn't necessarily that relevant to RSE, is that they are making the TV that they sell to us less intricate, less in depth, because it's being classed as second screen viewing. So we don't want a series on that we have to really concentrate on and have to really follow. They're taking some of the like plot twists and intricacies out of series because it's our second screen. We're scrolling and that's there. I feel very conscious not to just be on my phone while my kids are talking to me.
Yeah.
Which is really hard because they talk to you a lot. But I know I can't just be sitting there like, like actually we need to make eye contact with our children. We need to talk to them. We need to like model decent behavior. And actually we need to be aware of what's on their algorithm. What's on their feed and what are they looking at? Who's popping up? I have done an activity a few times with young people where you get them to get like a template of what would look like a home screen on Instagram or TikTok, a For You page, and ask them to kind of fill in the boxes. What's on your For You page? And I did mine with them. So my content—
What was on yours?
Yeah, my content generally is very much either funny and silly, lots of nice food and cake recipes.
Lovely.
And lots of stuff about sexual health. So my Instagram gets me and this that we're doing and our job. So I do find that my content is very much tailored to me and who I am. And algorithms are really important and you can actually influence your algorithm. But when you start having that conversation, opening up that conversation with your children and young people, what's on your For You page? What are you seeing? You might start to hear the same influencers' names popping up. You might start to hear the fashion and beauty brands. Like I know that a lot of the 13, 14-year-old girls will be doing their nighttime routines. They're so into skincare
and makeup and buying really expensive makeup. And I have this conversation a lot with young people, particularly around like, again, that age, body image. I hate my appearance. I don't like the way I look. And I always ask them, well, who's popping up on your feed? When you think about your TikTok or your Instagram, who are you seeing? And they'll tell me some of the people that they're seeing. And we have to have that conversation of, you know, everything that you see has been perfectly curated, because also those people may be getting paid for that one post that you've seen where they're just posed beautifully somewhere on holiday, or they're in somebody's clothing and they have perfectly done their makeup, their hair, they've made themselves look absolutely amazing. And if that's all you're seeing constantly, you're not actually seeing people's like real life.
Normality.
You're not seeing just normal stuff.
No. And also like we're all guilty of it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
We put our best selves on our social media pages. We present ourselves in the best possible light. And we share the things that are important to us. So it is important to understand what your children and young people are consuming. And I would say that my opinion is that it is a parent's responsibility to know what their children and young people are doing online. Yeah,
I love the idea that that if you are a parent and a carer and you don't know how to start that conversation, just to be like, who's coming up on your For You page? Just so you can start getting an idea of, and like you said, listening out for the same name so that you can also like do a little bit of research on who that person is, because we also know that people might share like, you know, really happy, lovely stuff on the internet, but people can also spread not so nice stuff or controversial stuff or very opinionated things, or like
young people in this age group, call it how it is. Young people in this age group will be aware of online influencers like Andrew Tate and the impact that has in schools. And that's a really hard one, because it isn't fair to say that every single message that comes from these people is inherently just negative. Like somebody who could be quite misogynistic or pushing quite a toxic masculinity culture could also be making some really good points about the impact of fitness on your mental health.
I was going to say men's well-being and mental health.
So it's about making sure that they're getting a balanced view. And actually, if you hear stereotypes, things that maybe don't align with the way you would want your kids to have an open, non-judgmental view of the world, it's about challenging those. Actually, that's cool that person thinks that, but I think this, and this is the reason. And it's at that age where our children will start to learn who we are as people. Because when they're very little, it's just, yay, parents, like, yay, mummy, yay, daddy, all of these people, they're like so amazing. And you're kind of hero worshipped by your very young children. And then when they kind of get into that teenage, preteen thing, they're like, oh, you're a human. What are your beliefs? What are your values? You're a person.
What do you think on this? What do you think about what's going on in the world right now? All that sort of stuff, And
actually, if you can't have that conversation with your young person, someone else will.
Someone else will, absolutely. And like we were having a conversation just before we started recording today about how, like, because young people are watching short form content all the time, they're watching snippets, they're looking at memes, they're reading like a Twitter status really quickly with a funny picture. They are not always getting the context of something. So also, like, I'm thinking of young boys in particular who may come home and start talking about Andrew Tate. Similarly, it's not a time to go, oh gosh, like we need to take their phones away, or we need to have a big conversation about misogyny and things. It's like understanding what exactly they've seen or heard or read. And then having a conversation, letting them ask questions, letting them, like, also as well, giving them safe resources and things to like explore it.
Other influencers, other alternatives. Like, Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. I've heard of that person.
Yeah.
I've seen some of their content. I also like this person. Have you tried following them?
Because like you said, I think what young people are doing sometimes through social media is trying to find role models, people that, like for us, role models would have been like maybe film stars or artists that we liked, Whereas they've got influencers, and some of these people want to grow up and be an influencer or be like this person. And it's like if they are looking at influencers and thinking I really want to be like them, but you as a parent are thinking I'm not sure that person is actually right. Like find somebody else, find an alternative, give them another suggestion.
Engage in the media that your children are interested with them. So I know that we spent a long time watching Mr. Beast videos and talking about and I know that people might say there's a whole host of other controversies around all sorts of YouTubers. No one's perfect, whatever. But we spent a long time watching Mr. Beast videos and talking about using the power of the internet to do good. Because that is a guy who chose to become famous by giving money away. And cool, the challenges got more obscure and wilder, and that's what happens to make content. But actually, realistically, what it came down to was his principle was, I'm going to get someone to sponsor me and you're going to watch this video so I can go and give money to someone who hasn't got any money. And that was a really nice sort of take on how we use the internet. And there is such a vast array of personalities. And there's gaming influencers that I don't know anything about. You guys don't know anything about. The people that are important to our children, we should probably take an interest in and take an interest in the content that they're looking at if we want them to really be safe online. So we're talking about this from quite a nicey perspective, but we said during this age group, there are maybe some things that are a bit more difficult. Now, there's some facts about pornography and children in this age group. Can you give us a little bit of an overview what's going on when it comes to the Key Stage 3 age group and accessing pornography online?
So in Key Stage 3, they probably won't actually talk about pornography as a whole, but they will be sort of discussing what is appropriate for them to be viewing, and they will talk about, adult sexual media maybe. And a lot of the time it will come from a law perspective. So they can't access, or they can't buy pornography under the age of 18. And we'll talk a little bit more about what else the law says for this age group in terms of being online. But we know that even if they're not talking about it in school yet, or they're not able to buy it yet, doesn't mean they haven't seen it. So I think this was by the Internet Watch Foundation, but we've also got some stats from the Children's Commissioner to share with you, that most young people at 9 years up, most young people by the age of 12 have been exposed to pornography or have seen pornography, and children as young as 9 are being exposed to pornography.
So I think it was 10% of 9-year-olds have viewed pornographic content on the internet, 25% of 11-year-olds, and over 50% of 13-year-olds. So we might not think that these conversations are relevant or appropriate for children this age, but what we do know statistically is that they are being exposed to age inappropriate material.
And that's it. They're not looking for it necessarily. They're not typing it in. They're just looking at their phones, looking at something else, and something will pop up. It's either on the side of their screen, or they're being sent a link to open, or maybe a friend has, sent something which they thought was really funny, and they've opened it, and actually it's a pornographic scene. And I think what we also are understanding a bit more from young people and the young people we work with, it's pornography that is really hardcore. I was trying to think of it, but it's hardcore. It's they might be seeing things about bestiality, age inappropriateness, sex that is displaying unconsensual acts, BDSM. So things that are just really inappropriate for that age group, because they haven't even had the opportunity to talk about sex itself and sex between two partners, or what that means, or what that might look like, and how consent comes into play in terms of a sexual relationship. They haven't had those conversations yet.
And then they're seeing 10 people in a room.
And it's everywhere. The conversation is also everywhere on social media. You have people talking about it on TikTok. They all know, and they all know about things like OnlyFans. Like they all
know about like Bonnie Blue and stuff like that that's going on. And actually, I think the thing that you need to be aware of as parents is that if there are things in the media that lots of people are talking about, whether that's, we were talking about celebrities and celebrities having sex with underage young people. That's a conversation that comes up. We were talking about OnlyFans and how that comes up with young people. They are aware of it. And if you know this is going on in the media, it's probably quite reasonable and responsible to bring up that conversation with your child or young person. And that doesn't have to be something really intense or awkward. Like, just, hey, what do you know about this?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you're not being told off. Oh my God, have you seen this? You're in trouble. Like, because the reality is, like, they haven't seen something like OnlyFans. They can't subscribe to stuff like that, but they do know what it is and they do know that it exists. The report by the Children's Commissioner that highlighted the statistics about young people viewing pornography talked a little bit about how young people felt when that was happening. And I think the really important thing to realize is that the young people who were viewing this age inappropriate content were not feeling like aroused.
No.
It wasn't for sexual gratification.
No.
So when the children described the words that they felt, it was things like weird, silly. I was just curious, confused. They're the sort of words that came back as how they felt about viewing it, as opposed to like a very low percentage of young people said they felt like excited or aroused by what they were seeing.
Yeah. And it is that, when you said the word curious, it made me think about, there will be some young people, maybe aged 13, 14, going into year 9, whose sexual feelings are there. And they may be starting to think about, well, how do people have sex? Like, how do two people come together, and what does that look like? And again, if no one's having the conversation about just basic physiology and how that works, the only place that they can find that is porn and looking at how sex happens and how sex works. And
the really hard thing about that, and the part that I would say is the parental responsibility, if you're willing to have that conversation, and the likelihood is if you're listening to this podcast and you want to learn more about it, you maybe are willing to have this conversation, is that pornography is entertainment for adults. It's not designed as a source of education for children and young people. So, okay, fine. That might mean there's a gap in the market where they want to know more about what sex means and how people have it, or why people have it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that what's on the internet is an accurate portrayal of sex and relationships.
You have another analogy about pornography, which you say to young people about.
I do. I've said this in assemblies actually quite a few times. So we talk about, I love an analogy. I used to teach English in another life. So that's probably why. But we talk about when a young person learns to drive, and when they watch the film Fast and Furious, or one of the many Fast and Furious films. So Fast and Furious is a film about driving for entertainment purposes. When you pass your driving test, you do not expect that you are going to be drifting, that you're going to be jumping your car over a bridge, that you're going to be getting into some mad car chases. Those exist for entertainment purposes. Yeah, that isn't a realistic lesson on how to drive a car. And actually, it's really important to give that context that pornography exists for entertainment purposes. It isn't normal in a first sexual experience for somebody to say, I'm gonna spank you or choke you or do anything that seems more extreme, or be having sex in a context that involves more than one person, which is really common in pornography. That isn't normal. And that isn't how you learn to have sex. In the same way as when you're learning to drive, you need to learn how to be safe and check your mirrors and check in. When you're young and you're having sex, you need to learn how to like check in with the person that you're having sex with. Like, is this okay? Yeah.
How are you?
Like, it doesn't need to be like intricate or a performance. And I think that young people think that maybe that the noise that comes from porn is like the normal expectation of sex. So they might feel disappointed, like, oh, well, it's not making me want to scream.
We do a lot of myth versus reality, don't we?
We do.
In terms of like what you see in porn versus what is real life, and try and get them to distinguish. Because like we said, most young people have seen porn by the time it comes to talking about porn at school. Like they're more likely to have those discussions and a lesson on it in Key Stage 4. But I think what we know and what the research suggests is that actually we need to start having those conversations just a little bit earlier, because you've got a generation of young people whose first idea of sex could be porn. So when it comes to first sex, that could pose quite a lot of issues.
I think it is actually affecting young people's view of first sex and normal sex as well. So, gosh, if you're getting off on watching hardcore porn from a young age, the reality is that your first sexual experience that is a bit fumbly and awkward and not necessarily what you're seeing online might not live up to your expectation. So that is really important for people to understand.
And we know as well that a lot of porn, if it's not an ethical porn, I mean, we could go on about this topic for ages, but my
special interest.
But one of my last points on it is that most porn that is accessible for young people to watch probably focuses on only one person's pleasure rather than both partners' pleasure. It focuses a lot on different size of bodies. It might involve very large penises, very large breasts, very hairless bodies, things like that.
I was actually just going to say that, very shaved vaginas.
So all of those expectations, that is then really confusing for young people. If they've learned about puberty and accepting your body and accepting your feelings and navigating those things, and then their first experience before they've even learned what sex is or why people have it is pornography, I think that just throws so many questions. Like,
so many
where
questions.
do they start then? How do they...
How do they get into that normal thing? And actually, we were talking about young people and sending and receiving images, and the fact that our, I guess, professional opinion would be that they think that sexting is the normal part of dating. So you go from like, oh, I'm going to go out with this person, to spending a lot of time communicating online and maybe sharing images, maybe having naughty conversations. That really does start over the phone. We were actually talking about our age group and how people did a lot more snogging, touching, rubbing.
With clothes on. Because we were having like a chat, and we both can think about our 14, 15-year-old selves. And I was terrified of, well, firstly, I didn't know how or what sex would be like. So I was like just scared of it, because I think also for our education and at school, it had been made to be like, just don't have it because you'll get pregnant, or don't have it till you're 16. Like, you absolutely cannot. Like, it was very preventative, and abstinence was like, it was really forced. That so basically, so I was terrified, so I wasn't even considering it. So all of those other things that I was doing, I was like, this is a really safe way of me being able to be affectionate with my partner and not get into trouble, and that's all really lovely. We didn't have phones that had I didn't have a phone that had a camera on, I think, until sixth form. And I wouldn't have ever sent a picture because it just wasn't really in our...
It wasn't a normal part.
No, like we might have sent flirty messages, cheeky little messages here and there. But it wasn't a normal part of life to just send a picture of me in my underwear, or send a nude, or to want a nude of my partner. Like,
yeah. And actually, when we're talking about consent in a digital age and how technology impacts young people, it's about teaching young people, okay, cool, you're not allowed to pressure someone to send an image or do things like that online. But actually also, you are not allowed to send an unsolicited naked image of yourself. Yeah. That's a really key, really important thing.
You're just breaking the law.
You're just breaking the law. Like received dick pics in my life I didn't ask for, I didn't want, in a relationship from random strangers. And that really isn't appropriate. And that is something that we do tackle with this age group. And we do talk about consent in an online forum because, okay, cool, you don't want to meet up at the park and snog on the swings for 3 hours.
Shame.
I know. But you do want to talk to each other online, and you might get a bit flirty.
Yeah.
We need to know how to do that safely, and we need to know that boundaries still exist and consent still exists in that forum.
And I think young people recognizing, like, you know, we've seen lots of faces suddenly go, what? When we talk about young people sending each other, you know, let's say, for example, there are two 14-year-olds and they've been together for a while and they aren't having sex, but they're getting a bit flirty and they are feeling like, you know, all those sexual feelings and stuff. So they'll send nude images consensually to each other, and they've agreed that and they've negotiated that, and that feels like an important part of their relationship. But what we say to young people is that what you're exchanging with each other is classed as child pornography, even if it's of yourself.
Yeah, they really don't get that though.
Because when they think of child pornography, they think of very tiny young children. But we mean anybody under the age of 18 who's technically still a child.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time when we talk about the law, you know, and I think this is helpful maybe for parents and carers, again, it's not to scare them. It's not to think that they're going to get in trouble with the police, because the likelihood of those two 14-year-olds getting into serious trouble is unlikely. But they probably would have some stern words from either that school, parents, potentially the police, depending on what they then do with those photos once they've shared them with each other. But it's all about, that is a law that exists to protect young people. And I always say not to prosecute them, but to protect them, because whenever I say to a young person, okay, so you've sent that image to your boyfriend or your girlfriend, you've now lost complete control over that image, haven't you? And we talk a lot about trust and how there's, like, you know, respect in a relationship, and how, well, but I really trust them, so I don't think they would do that to me.
But they're always so shocked.
Yeah.
So when somebody gets their personal, private, intimate images leaked, they're so shocked. Like, I never thought this would happen to me. They don't know really what to do in that situation. And that is a point where, as parents, we need to put our judgment to one side, or as professionals or as caregivers, it's not just parents, and support the young person in the situation they're in. So if their nudes have been leaked, they need to support how to get that image removed.
Yes.
We have got a Padlet that is in the description of our episodes, and we'll put in some information about the I forgot what it's called.
Report remove tool.
The report remove tool in that, so that people know how to access that, because these things do exist. Even if you go on Luton's multi-agency safeguarding hub, one of the first thing that comes up is, do you need to support to remove an image of a young person? And that can be accessed by a professional or by a parent.
Yeah.
So there is support out there. But what we need to do is, like, remove the judgment from that situation. Like, cool, they've made a mistake. I think they know. Yeah. By the time their images have been leaked and somebody's broken their trust and they're hurt and they didn't expect it would happen to them.
And sometimes the whole school has seen it. Like, it can be really mortifying, embarrassing. We've had young people leave school. We've had young people not return to school. Like, it can be really, like, quite a traumatic experience.
Definitely. And if in that situation, the way the adult handles that is to absolutely lose their head, that isn't going to help. You do need to support them where they're at, and they need to know that they can trust you. So another part of this online image sharing that is really important and that we talk to young people about is sextortion. And I think that building a relationship of trust with your young person is important if you find yourself in that sort of situation. Can you kind of explain a little bit about what sextortion means and what the risks are with that? Yeah,
so sextortion is when somebody may blackmail you, manipulate you to gain something from you if you have shared an image with them. So they may, for example, somebody online may have asked for an image of you, a naked image, a sexual image or video of you. And this could be someone you've been talking to for a while and you've built up that connection. You believe that person's your friend, or they've got your best interests, or you've been playing games with them online, something like that. And you've sent them those images. And then what they will do is they will continue to ask for more images, and they may blackmail you and say, if you don't do this, then I will share these images and you'll be in massive trouble because you've broken the law by sending them because you're under 18, or you've broken the law because you've sent them to me without my consent. And there are incidences where young people unfortunately have taken their own lives over situations like that, because it's become so much bigger and too much to handle, and they felt like they can't share that with anybody or tell anybody like that at home because for fear of getting into so much trouble.
Yeah.
Maybe young people have sent more images. Maybe young people have sent this person money. Maybe they've shared personal information. So that young person is genuinely very terrified that this person could do something serious to harm them.
And I think the key thing is that it doesn't stop.
No,
with sextortion. This is a relentless, relentless attack on this young person. And it is going to be absolutely crippling for their mental health and well-being. And the thing is that it's fundamentally linked to shame. So you have done something that it's perceived you should be ashamed of. So now you need to hide that shame. And then you just kind of dig in that bigger hole. And that's why we talk about how important it is to teach your kids that they can trust you, and about safe adults. And one of the things that is really important is that every young person needs a safe adult in their life. That safe adult does not have to be their parent or main caregiver.
Yeah, we're a lot of young people's safe adults.
We're a lot of young people's safe adults. And I think I guess I always will be, because like even with my children's friends, I know they'll go, I'm going to tell you about this, I'm going to tell you about that. But actually, maybe my own kids might not want to have every single conversation with me, that I might not be the safest person for every single part of that. I know I've mentioned before that my children are being brought up by myself and my wife. So they've got two mums, and my brother is a perfect safe adult for my son, because he might want a guy to chat to about some things. And I'm not going to be funny about that. Like if he wants to chat to my brother about something, that's fabulous. At least I know he's talking to someone who's safe. And I know growing up, and we both talked about this actually, we both had an aunt that didn't have any children and who very much was a hugely safe adult in my life growing up, when my relationship with my parents might have been like stormy or difficult, or maybe what I needed from a safe adult was space with no conversation. She was able to provide that for me.
And someone that doesn't discipline you or doesn't tell you to do your homework and things like that. Like just somebody to speak to in a free way. But like, that is why, because we're not saying that every young person will experience something like that online, or every young person is at risk, but it is something that we're seeing more and more of, and something young people need to be aware, but particularly parents and carers, so that you can also maybe spot the signs that your young person is not okay or something is going on. Can you give us any sort of signs that you might think, or maybe I need to check in with my young person because of the way that they're presenting or behaving, or I'm a bit worried about who they're speaking to online?
Absolutely. So if I think in terms of signs, if your young person was seeming like much more withdrawn, they're very preoccupied, sort of seem quite stressed, very disengaged in conversations that you're having with them, and a noticeable change in behavior. So not everyone's child might be chatting 24 hours a day as it is. So seeming more disengaged might not be the thing. But actually, if they love games and normally they want to spend all of their time, I don't know, playing Fortnite. But now they're like, no, I hate Fortnite. I don't want to go out on it anymore. It's about that noticeable change in behavior, whether they might seem more like disruptive or aggressive or angry. So they might have, teenagers and preteens get angry and they get emotional, and sometimes we're like, okay, you've got. But
like every behavior is trying to tell you something.
Yeah, exactly. So what is that behavior trying to tell you, and how has that behavior changed? And then things like asking for money to spend lots of money on games. But again, is it out of character? Is it different from what they normally do? Do they seem pressured? Do they seem stressed about it? Is there kind of a thing of desperation?
I was going to say, I have to be on this game at this time. I have to, like,
it's non-optional. It's all right. The world's not going to end. But actually, maybe they think it might.
Exactly.
And then I think it's stuff like just making sure that we're aware of how long our children are spending on the computer. So I don't really necessarily believe that if you've got children that are 11 to 14, you should be going to bed at night and leaving them playing on games. because that's when things kind of can get a bit scary, like in the depths and darks of the night. That's when your worries and your fears and all that kind of stuff really do start to build up. So setting some boundaries around what time we're allowed to be playing games, and if you notice them desperate to break and push those rules, I would be having a much closer look at what they were doing online.
Amazing. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Fab. So that is a little bit more about online safety. And I think what will be really cool is when we can, not cool, that's the wrong word to use, but it will be great to look back on this episode when we talk about exploitation and grooming a bit more specifically in some later episodes. Before we sort of finish today, I thought it would also be good, because we do work in a sexual health clinic.
Yeah.
And we do see key stage 3 young people. So more 13, 14-year-olds.
Yep.
We don't see anybody under the age of 13 in the clinic, really, but over the age of 13, we do. To talk a little bit about
the intersection between the work we do in the sexual health clinic and the education and outreach role we have in the community.
Yeah.
Because I think the elephant in the room is that 13 and 14-year-olds are having sex and they are accessing sexual health services.
Yeah.
It isn't all of them. And they might have, or they are likely to have potentially some other adverse childhood experiences going on in their life at the same time as that.
Yeah.
But we would be naive as professionals to not let people know that 13 and 14-year-olds are having sex.
And what we know is that a lot of the time these 13, 14-year-olds are having first sex without contraception.
Yeah.
Because maybe they don't know how they can access it. It's not being made aware to them. They haven't had the education yet at school. So they are sort of left in the dark a little bit, and they're just sort of going with the flow. And then they do end up coming to us, and we do get all of that sorted for them. But like you said, I think it is important to be aware that also we have lots of things in place within the clinic to make sure that when somebody under the age of consent comes through to us who needs STI testing, contraception, emergency contraception, like the morning after pill, that we do lots of stuff as a service to safeguard them, to make sure that they are protected and that everything in their life is okay, or as much as we can control as possible. So can you just give us a little quick overview of like Gillett competency and Fraser guidelines?
Absolutely. So Gillett competency and Fraser guidelines are the legal framework that allow us to offer sexual health medical intervention to young people under the age of 16. So they have the right to access that service without having to have a parent or guardian come with them or have an adult present during that consultation. Obviously, we do encourage young people to talk to their parents and guardians. And I hate the thought of parents being upset, like, why would you talk to my kid about this? But they're not talking to me. But actually, it's more safe that we talk to your child about it than they don't talk to anyone. And it's not our responsibility to make them talk to you. So the Gillett competency framework is used with young people aged 13 to 15. And basically what it does is, when a young person comes into a clinic, we'll go through something called an under 18s pro forma. And for us, I guess it's basically a bit of a safeguarding checklist.
Yeah.
And it isn't presented to a young person in a way of just being a tick box exercise. It is genuinely a conversation between one of us or maybe a clinician and the young person about how safe they feel, about their confidence and self-esteem, their mental well-being, how many sexual partners they're having, the types of sex they're having, where they're having sex, if they feel like they're under any pressure or if they're being asked to do anything they're uncomfortable with. It prompts us with questions so that we can ascertain how safe that young person is in what they're doing. Things like, do you feel comfortable talking to your partner about contraception? Do your friends like the person you're having sex with? Those kind of questions. So we work through that pro forma with a young person. And then at the end, it gives us professionals some questions to answer to say whether we perceive that a young person is Gillett competent and they can proceed forward to get their medical advice and access that sexual health service, whether that's testing, screening, contraception, whatever it is. So it will ask us if the young person's well-being or like mental or physical well-being would be negatively affected by not being able to access this service. So obviously, when it comes to contraception or screening, the answer to that question is generally yes. Yeah. It would have a bigger negative impact on a young person if they were to get pregnant unplanned at the age of 13 or 14 than it would for them to access service.
Because it also asks us whether the young person is likely to continue having sex without the help and support of a sexual health service, so without contraception. And the majority of the time when we do meet young people, because for some reason, and we are going to explore this in more depth, probably in Key Stage 4, young people are not using condoms at all. If you, like, they're just not. It's at an all-time low since, I think, forever.
Since condoms have been freely and readily available to young people, they've never been
they're
used.
Not using them, so they are more likely to continue having sex with their partner without any contraception and without any guidance from a medical professional about how to keep themselves safe from infection and unplanned pregnancy.
That's it. So it goes through these questions. We ask them, we get a really good understanding of where they're at, what's going on. And if I'm being really honest, a lot of the young people who would fit into the Key Stage 3 age group are really end of year 9, last part of being 14, maybe approaching 15. And they're in age appropriate relationships. We ask about the age of their partner. It's generally curious young people having sex with other curious young people because they want to find out a little bit more about sex and relationships, what it feels like, all of that kind of thing. And generally they're hiding it, but actually they are taking steps to be safe. So our role is to support them in that. And our condom card service is something that's huge. Like, we provide free condoms. Well, we provide free condoms at Luton Sexual Health for everyone because we have a service. We are, because we have a service for over 25s and under 25s, but actually condoms are really free and accessible, available in pharmacies, colleges, youth clubs, schools, whatever. We work really hard to make that accessible to young people. And that is from 13 as well. So even if it's just, hey, have a look at a condom. Practice using one. It's not weird.
Exactly. And that's a point that we also will make, I suppose, is just because young people are coming through to the clinic doesn't always mean they're sexually active, but it does mean that they're taking like responsibility and thinking this could happen in the next couple of months or whatever. So I want to make sure that my partner and I are safe and that everything is ticked off, and like, you know,
I love it when young,
so do I. It really impresses
couples,
me.
When young
I feel really proud.
Me too. When a young couple come into the clinic and they're like, we have an under 18s clinic on a Thursday evening and we offer like information and advice there, as well as an opportunity to speak to a doctor or to have a medical appointment. And we find young people come in, we're going to have sex. It's like, wicked. Like, okay, and you're
They've had that conversation. They know that they need to come to us because they're not ready to have any babies or whatever it might be. And
they want to do it safely. And actually that's really responsible. And also we do have a lot of parents that have a lot more of an open conversation and dialogue.
I was going to say, to be fair, we get lots
of
parents who do come in with their child as well,
definitely,
and support them when if they're having an implant fitted or they're going on the pill. Because also young people, they're young, like they are maybe having sex, but sometimes they just do want their parent there with them for that support, to feel like, you know, safe, and they're making good decision.
Parents might worry that they would be judged by the clinic, for example. Never.
No.
So we think that you're a great parent. If you're bringing your child or a young person in to see us, we think that you're a really good parent because we see lots of young people in lots of risky situations where no adult in their life has a clue what's going on. If you are having an open and honest conversation with your child and they're saying, actually, I think I might have sex with my partner, and you're like, okay, cool, let's look up our local service and find out what contraception option might work for you.
We get parents, so we come in and ask for contraception leaflets so that they can go away and have a conversation before they then come back to the clinic and decide what's best for them. Like, to me, I feel like that just feels really normal, and that feels like like I asked my mum in the kitchen when she was cooking, I think I should go on the pill, can you take me to the doctors? And she was like, yeah, sure.
Like, absolutely same. Like,
you know, that's just
it's nice.
It's nice.
So that's not to say that we think that lots and lots and lots of 13, 14-year-olds, year 9s are having sex, because they're not.
No.
But some are.
But some are.
Yeah.
Some are. And so it's important that they know that our service is available to them.
Yeah.
Even if they haven't hit that point in the curriculum.
Excellent. So we did on some of the other episodes, we didn't do it on the last episode because we had Will chatting to us at the end and his questions and opinions. But on some of the episodes, we've talked about questions that we get asked by children and young people. And there's one question that pops up in this age group that is quite interesting. And we'll talk about that. So I would say one of the most common questions I've been asked by 11 to 13-year-olds is, why do people have sex?
Why, what, where, how?
Yeah. They really want to get into it then.
Yeah, they're curious, and they are getting to that stage where that is age appropriate, definitely, for them to know a bit more of the ins and outs. Because by the time they're in key stage 4, and we'll get on to that next time, they're learning about STIs, they're learning about condoms, they're learning how to put one on. So how do we answer that question when young people ask us, what is sex and why do people have it? Sometimes I throw it back at them, because that is a really great diversion tactic as well. If you need a bit of time to assess how you're going to answer it.
What do you think?
What do you think? And I do a lot of that. Like I'll say the only thing you can't write down is it's how people make a baby, because by now they know that.
And actually, I think the hard part of moving from potentially even the beginning of key stage 3 to the end of key stage 3 is the concept that
I know what you're going to say.
people have sex to make a baby.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So people have sex to make a baby. Well, if they're having sex to make a baby, then why do we need to think about contraception? Because why on earth would people be having sex if it wasn't to make a baby? Has anyone ever told them that it's fun?
Yeah. And that it feels nice.
Feels nice.
Yeah.
It makes people feel close and connected.
Yeah.
And that's normal. And that if your young person is saying, why do people have sex? It's really normal to have those kind of answers that it's a positive thing.
It's a positive thing. And we want young people to know it's a positive thing. Yeah. We want young people to know that it does feel nice and should make you feel good. We don't want young people to think it does the opposite, because if it is, then we don't want them to be having sex with who they're having sex with.
Yeah, or in the way that they're doing it.
Or in the way that they're doing it. Like, it's how we move the conversation on when we talk about consent a little bit more. It's about expressing things that you like and you dislike. It's not just, please may I have sex with you? Yes, you can. Like, it's a bit more about exploring what that means to these two people in that relationship. And like you said, it might bring people closer. It might just be really fun. They might just really enjoy it. But yeah, we
it's such a big concept though, really, that doesn't really get introduced as part of the curriculum, like sex for fun. Although
Pleasure's
we talk about
really
the risk, pleasure is not really involved in the curriculum. No. And we know that young people know that people have sex for pleasure. And also, I think it's really important to recognize the fact that these urges and, I don't know, horniness or however else we're going to describe it with young people are they're biological. The continuation of the human race relies on our innate biological desire to reproduce and to have sex and to connect with people. So you're not the first person in the world to feel like they really wanted to do it or that they were curious, those kind of things.
And if you're having that discussion with your young person who's asked you and they're in year 8 or year 9 and you say that to them, that doesn't mean you're encouraging them to go and have sex. It doesn't mean that you're planting the seed. Oh yeah, great. So it feels nice. So I'm going to go and have sex tomorrow.
No, absolutely. Because actually, if you're going to say to them that potentially sex feels nice and that's why people do it, it's probably important to highlight that some people touch themselves because that feels nice. Some people choose to do other things that we might class as sex. And a conversation that isn't necessarily on the curriculum with that age group, but I do talk about in one-to-ones when we say what is sex, is sex doesn't necessarily just mean penis in vagina.
Yeah.
And if we're delivering our curriculum from a really inclusive point of view, and we talked about different identities and LGBT identities, that sex between two men or two women might look different than between a heterosexual couple.
That's really important when we get into key stage 4, because it's important that they know the different ways that someone might have sex, because there are different ways that somebody might be at risk of an STI, for example. Just because you're not having penis in vagina sex doesn't mean you're not going to get an STI. Yes, it means you're not going to get pregnant, but
but
like still at risk of.
Yeah, people think like, oh, oral sex, no risk.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So actually it is about starting that conversation and preparing them for year 10 and 11.
Yeah.
And I mean, some children in this age group are a million miles away from thinking about sex, and that is absolutely fair.
Yeah. And it's fine. And that's fine.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
And it is sometimes awkward and uncomfortable, and it is sometimes difficult. But it is our responsibility to make sure that they are well equipped, well prepared, and have the information they need.
Information. Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about being online. We talked about it in a couple of episodes ago, but otherwise they're just going to find it on TikTok and it might be wrong. Yeah. So it's nicer that it just comes from you and it's informed and it's accurate.
Excellent. Wow, that's been a big one.
Yeah.
That has been a lot. So if you have, do you know what? If you have any more questions about this age group, our email address will be in our bio and you can drop us an email. We can have a chat. If you've got a question, that's fine. If you've got something that you think you'd like us to go into a little bit more detail on, then let us know on social media or drop us a message. No problem at all. Next time, we are going to be talking about Key Stage 4, Year 10 and 11. So that is the last element of school and of the school curriculum. We're going to do another 2 episodes on Year 10 and 11 and what's covered in there.
Yeah.
We're going to make sure all of our parents, professionals and caregivers have got tip-top education on STIs and that they know how to use a condom. Safely, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye.